So, since over the past couple of days, I've been in the process of trying to make notes out of thin air because there is zero lecture in my abstract algebra class. Thought I could make a quick video on how I've gone about doing that, and maybe someone will find it useful or helpful. So, I got a bunch of scrap paper, probably like a half dozen sheets or so, and I started writing down just in a really quick, rough list all of the things I was fairly certain would be on the test, and that consisted primarily of things from the homework and also the one and two things that have been mentioned in class, which is basically nothing. And then I took those and made a really rough looking outline, and I gave a bunch of space in between each one to write relevant things for each thing, and I tried to order them so that their order made sense. Like if I have two things A and B, and I need to know A in order to understand B, then I would try to put A first, try to do things in a logical manner so that it's, one thing is building on the next, so that by the time I get to something, I understand it because I've read everything that came before it. And then at that point, I went through my textbook, which I'm not a fan of, Wikipedia, Math Stack Exchange, and a couple other additional supplemental reference books that I have, and I wrote down all of the relevant theorems I could find for each topic and section, all of the corollaries, all of just the here and there things, bits and pieces that I thought might be useful for a test, and just general knowledge as well. Because not only am I going to use this to prepare for my exam Thursday, and today's Sunday, I want this to be reference that I can look back to years later and have it made so well that it's still good. And the fact that I haven't been knee deep in the material in several years won't be much of a hindrance. Beyond that, I tried to put examples wherever necessary. Right now, there aren't really a lot for me to speak of. Like I've said in previous videos talking about preparing for this exam, most of the stuff is definition based. So if I understand a definition and the symbols in it and the parts of them and their significance as far as like set notation theory and all of that stuff, then usually that's sufficient. There's not really a lot of algorithmic stuff to do, with maybe one or two exceptions. And then usually at that point I found new stuff that I accidentally overlooked or forgot to write down, and I'll like put an arrow in the middle of a paragraph or a section and put an arrow off to the side because I've run out of room, and I'll put it in there. It's like, hey, I want this here. And also at that point I'll figure out how I want to have the physical organization of it. Like I want all the definitions to have a hyphen next to them, and then I'll indent and have, bullet points for all of the facts and theorems and corollaries and stuff, which is usually how I do things, because I think it's kind of obvious that you need to have a definition of something in order to know other things about it. Like if you don't know what an automorphism is, then if I tell you some fact about an automorphism, that's not going to do you much good. And that goes for my future self when I maybe and or probably forget what an automorphism is. And also at that point, I'll try and be really honest with myself, as honest as possible about what does and does not need to go in the notes, because a lot of times I'll try and calm myself and I'll say, I don't need to write this down because I'll remember it, or it's trivial, or I find it to be obvious. And maybe it is trivial, and maybe it is obvious to me right now because I do this several hours a day, for weeks and weeks now. But maybe in a couple days when it's not as fresh in my mind, maybe I won't remember it as well or at all. Same thing goes for a year or two from now. Maybe I'll leave out some important part that I have committed to memory now, but that I won't necessarily remember in the future. And generally I'll try and err on the side of caution, and I'll add things even if I think they're minor and trivial and obvious right now. And a lot of times that will take the form of writing a statement and then writing the same statement in a different form. So writing something in set notation and then trying to turn it into my own words. Like rather than just having the expression, I'll write it out and say something to the effect of, if A is a generator, if A belongs to group G and A is a generator of G, then G is the set of all A to the n for some n and z n. Just, it says the same exact thing, but maybe it'll make it click a little faster the next time I read it. And then at that point, I'll be in a position to make my final notes. Most of the things will be in the right order, and then at that point, rather than just scribbling it out in my chicken scratch, I can go back and write it really nicely, because I have to put a lot of effort into my writing if I want it to look half decent. and I'm not nearly good enough at LaTeX or willing to devote the time right now to learn it and then type it. So I'd rather just have it handwritten in that way. It gives me another opportunity to like commit it to memory in addition to reading it and like saying it out loud and talking to myself about it and stuff like that. So that's more or less that. Obviously that's very much boiled down and it's a very long process, at least for me. It's taking me probably an hour and a half to 2 hours per page to make things just the way I want them, but I'm happy to do it. I know that once it's done, it'll be perfect forever, for me at least, you know, my own reference, and it'll be organized just the way I like it, and it'll be the best possible notes for me. So hope that was helpful or interesting. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.